Hello to my followers and friends. I would like to make this recording detailing events in the world and in Israel. Yesterday evening, Israel mourned what is called the 9th of the Hebrew month Av, or in Hebrew Tisha B'Av. It's the morning of the falling, the destruction of the second temple built by King Solomon in Jerusalem. The 9th of Av has basically been historically for some reason, a climatic day in the history of Judaism and in mankind. The first temple, the second temple, in more modern days, the destruction of the Warsaw Ghetto, and many other traumatic events. What can we learn about the 9th of Av and what it means to us as mankind? Basically, I feel that mankind is right now in a hateful situation, man against man, religion against religion, peoples against peoples. We witnessed this on a small scale in the Rio Olympics, where Muslim sports personalities refused to ride on the same bus as Israelis, or refused to shake hands in judo matches, or refused to even participate in a sports event against Israeli athletes, on one hand. On the other hand, we see events by what is called the BDS, Boycott, Divest and Sanction movement against Israel, where Israel is pinpointed as some horrible occupying apartheid regime, so untruthful and so not based on any type of fact, but picked up by a lot of progressive politicians and nations as part of a propaganda war raging against the state of Israel and against Judaism. The two are so interrelated, you cannot separate them. Unfortunately, also a lot of this BDS movement has gathered not only uninformed individuals, but Jewish individuals as well, which is something extremely strange and unfathomable. We've suffered as a people so much, and now our people are against our people as well. You have Americans against Americans, you have the right against the left against the right, Democrats against the Republicans, and Republicans against Democrats. On one hand, it seems like things are unraveling. Yet on another hand, at least people that I meet on the street are friendly or welcoming or loving. If someone needs help, someone's willing to give it. The whole pay it forward idea, it seems like there's a dichotomy of values and of views. On one hand, we seem to be moving forward in a loving and understanding and accepting type of way. On the other hand, we seem to be falling behind in all sorts of biased and bigoted campaigns against one group or another. A perfect example is the United Nations, its human rights agenda, which has as part of its human rights committee members from the worst human rights countries in the world, such as Saudi Arabia, such as Iran, countries that don't really have any human rights, so to speak, and they're judging other people as to the human rights that they are supposedly in violation of. Nothing really seems to make much sense. It's my feeling that Tisha B'Av, or the 9th of Av, came about as a warning, as a measure of bringing people back together, as an understanding of brotherhood, of respect for other men, for other peoples, as an understanding that God rules everything and knows everything and plans everything, and He's trying to keep man from destroying himself. How much have we learned from it? I don't think that much. Can it happen again? Most certainly it can. There's always talk about the third temple rising, falling from the skies above and being built from the ground below. I tend to feel that even the first temple and the second temple, and what most people view to be the building of the third temple, isn't a building of bricks, of rocks, of marble, of splendid decorations of gold-covered candlesticks and trumpets and etc., but rather that the third temple is man himself. We don't need fancy, expensive, golden-plated buildings, lavishly decorated, in order to seek out God, in order to pray to God, or to give Him thanks. All of these cathedrals, all of these massive churches, all of these synagogues and mosques and other types of buildings that man create using huge amounts of wealth and money rather than feeding its hungry and homing its homeless is, I would say, as far from what God imagined the temple to be. The first temple, when Moses left Israel and was given the 10 Commandments, was housed in a tabernacle made out of cloth that they traveled with, a tent. And that's where God resided. How did man come from housing God's most precious gift to mankind in a tent to building massive structures and such in order to pray to Him? It makes no sense. I would prefer to pray to God on a mountaintop covered in grass and wild flowers and shady trees, and maybe even stand there barefoot, feeling the earth and feeling His presence, than standing in a massive, decorated, fancy, towering type of building or structure to try to pray to Him. I truly hope and pray that love will conquer the hate that's traveling around the world today, that common sense will take over, that humanity will rise to the occasion of understanding that we're all created by God, that we're all His children, no matter what religion you might practice. I think what's important is accepting the other religions, understanding that there's differences between people's beliefs, and not warring with them, and not fighting with them, and not trying to destroy them, not trying to win them over either. Whether it be radical Islam, willing to cut off a person's head if they don't join their religious beliefs, or whether it be a different type of schooling of Christianity that might send missionaries over to some country that's living in poverty, and in exchange for food and for education, they would have to transfer their religious beliefs to match those of the people feeding them. So long as a person is praying to his God and accepting of other people praying to their gods, we should be okay with it. I see also on YouTube and different social media all sorts of supposed pastors and preachers and know-it-alls and with followings of hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, all spewing their view of what's right and what's wrong. Who appointed them to that position to know what's right and what's wrong? There's only one person, only one being that knows what's right and wrong, and that's God Himself. We don't know. The most uninformed, uneducated person knows approximately the same amount of information of what's right and wrong to the most scholarful religious scholar that claims to have some sort of close connection to the God, and he's teaching us what to do and what to say and what's right and what's wrong. It's ridiculous. It's egotistical. It's so far from the truth. God Himself said that no man can see His face. It didn't mean literally to see what His face looks like, but meant no one can understand that dimension of spirituality. Our goal on this earth should be to better humankind, to guard over the animals given to us, to take care of the world, of its nature, of its beauty, to leave it in a slightly better situation than we found it. That should be our goal, which includes loving mankind, accepting mankind, not fighting against mankind. Does this mean we should all be pacifists? Most certainly not. If we are attacked, we need to protect ourselves and attack back, on one hand. On the other hand, we have to reach out to those attacking us and try to change their ways by showing them the light of love and understanding and acceptance. This all seems probably a impossible task to undertake, and wishful thinking, living in dreamland, etc. But hey, I would rather be wishful thinking in a positive manner than been wishful thinking in a negative manner, of creating some sort of caliphate, of forcing people to believe what the belief is that I'm supporting, and etc. I'd rather be dreaming about peace, about happiness, about prosperity, about togetherness, about brotherhood, than that of conquering other minds and other peoples and other beliefs. Yeah. So again, to the 9th of the month Av, I think should be teaching us all that the third temple, which is coming, is man himself and his heart, and he's accepting of other men, of understanding that we can pray and reach God just by standing outside in a grassy field and not in some decorated, beautiful, expensive temple. It's not needed. What better way to reach and to pray and to thank God than to stand in His magnificence, in the nature that He created Himself. He didn't create any fancy temples and bricks and mortar and reinforcement bars and etc. To be able to pray to Him outside with a breeze on your back, with the stars in the sky, perhaps even the moon shining, what could be more beautiful than standing in the middle of a building, enclosed, and not seeing the heavens, looking upon golden-plated statues and artifacts and stained glass windows and who knows what else? No, that's not what I envision the third temple to be. We need to go back to basics, to principles and values of honoring our fellow man. Befriend someone that you might see needs help. Pass it forward. That someone that's hungry on the street might have a meal to eat. Help a child that's crying and upset. Lend a hand to someone that's been hurt. Hug someone that seems to be afraid. Wipe the tear off of your friend's face and tell him that you're there for him or for her. That's the third temple. It's not made out of bricks. It's not made out of gold or lavish ceramic tile. It's not a mosque, it's not a church, it's not a synagogue. It's our heart. We have to unlearn all of the hate that we've learned. We have to divest ourselves from evil, from hate, from bigotry, and from bias. We have to boycott any type of propaganda that's unfounded, that's not based on history and on fact. We have to call out those that are doing wrong by their names and ask them to join humankind. We cannot be swayed by monies, by political pressures. We need to walk the path of righteousness in doing right, in doing good for mankind. Don't take me wrong, I'm not talking about one religion or another. We're all guilty as charged. Whether it be in the Old Testament, whether it be in the New Testament, whether it be in the Quran, there's all verses of hate. There's all verses of not accepting specific classes of people. There's all verses of how one person is better than someone else. But I claim that those verses were written by man, not by God. They were misconstrued over the translations over thousands of years, from Aramaic to Hebrew to Greek to Latin to English, kind of like the game of the broken telephone. We need to look between the lines. I'm not saying change the books. I'm not saying change the Bibles or the Quran. I'm saying understand. that the basic principle of all of these books is to love mankind and to love one another and to thank God who created it all. Small little acts of thanks, of understanding that in the massive history of the universe, of the earth and its creation, of mankind and its history, we're a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction, a dot on a long, 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 millions and billions of years spectrum. When it says that in the Bible that God created the world in 7 days, actually in 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested, and following the chronological passage of the Bible, many will say the world's only 5,000 years old, and it was created in the first 6 days of that. Understand that 7 days in biblical times, in creation times, was probably not 7 days that man decided was a 24-hour day. Time doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if the world's 5,000 years old or 50 billion years old. What does matter is the small portion of time that we've been around, what we do with it. There's things in the Bible and passages and in the Quran that man will simply never understand, perhaps was never meant to understand. Obviously, you'll have scholars that will research every single word and what it means and what its function is and what its mathematical value is and whether it was meant in the past tense, in the present tense, in the future tense. Why study the words? Study the message. And the message in all of these books is to help and to love one another. So when the third temple comes, when man's heart opens up and accepts one another, and we learn to live together, we shall live like that in bliss for 1,000 years. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you become a follower of my different types of recordings, some which are poetry, some which are religious orientated, some which are politically orientated. I have no real agenda. I just say what's on my mind. I hope it's not boring, and I hope that it's taken in the way that it was given, which is always in love and in acceptance. Thank you very much. Amen.